It's interesting you bring up a phrase, which is the word power.
Power.
I was meeting with the guys not too long ago, and I said, you know, what we need to pray for and what we need to seek after is to have the manifest power of God in our lives. And it's one thing for, you know, Brad to say, hey, I still have a job, that's the hand of God. It is the hand of God, absolutely. It is one thing to say, for me to say, hey, my business is showing a 20% decrease from last year, but I've had more money this year than I did last year. Somehow that doesn't make sense, but yet that's the hand of God. It's one thing to see the Lord working in our lives and doing things amongst us, but it's another thing to see the miraculous manifestation of the power of God. They're two different things. And I want to share, and I didn't know if I was going to do this today, but I want to share a testimony of a guy who just left Texas. He was spending some time with my dad, and I think I can read this fairly quickly. This guy had been with Steve, and he was a minister of sorts in Vermont, and he had a business, and there was all kinds of interconnections and so forth. This guy's name is Lewis. And Lewis had an interesting background. He came out of a holiness background. If you've ever been to a holiness church, if you've ever been to a Mormon church, that's holiness based. That's, you don't drink, you don't smoke, you don't swear, you just have this laundry list of don'ts, and that is by which you are made holy or righteous. Well, for him to go to Texas or having anything to do with my dad, you guys, when you meet my father, will realize that he is not a holiness guy. If you think I am not holiness, you have no clue of what is not holiness, because his very existence is like nails on the chalkboard to most religious people. You just don't know until you go. Brad's going to find out. This guy got a rude awakening, and there's some kind of harsh statements he makes, but it's interesting how it all winds up in the end, because we're talking about power. Now, it's one thing to talk about biblical philosophy. It's one thing to talk about just the heighty-flighties of church and all this other stuff. It's another thing to have it demonstrated and proven. Two different things. What makes, I think, Casey asked me the question, what makes one religion better than another, right? And I tried to explain to her that it's not about religion. I mean, first of all, Christianity is not religion. It's relationship. And the difference is that when you are plugged into that conduit of power with the Almighty God, He not only works in your life, but He works through you to impact the lives of other people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And that's when Sue would come, and when we first met, she had allergies. The Lord delivered her the allergies. When Linda came to the Bible study the first time and I prayed for her, she didn't have that migraine left her that night. I mean, it's when the miraculous of God happens to confirm His Word. That's sort of that conduit of power that we need in our lives.
Amen.
Okay? Has nothing to do with our physical actions. Let me just try and bring this to an example, because this is a very good kind of object lesson. This guy's name is Lewis, and he says this: my name is Lewis, I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name, Lewis Al, A-L, G-A-R-A-N, Algarin or something. And I went through an amazing restoration at Grace Ranch. Now let's look at this guy's life. I am a failed businessman, a church pastor, a husband, father of 4. Before going to the ranch, I had endured the worst year of my life. I had a terrible business failure that affected many innocent people and put my life to an open shame. I became public enemy #1 in Vermont and suffered the loss of all my assets. I also lost my pastoral affiliation, was stripped of all my ordination papers and all my ministry certifications. Finally, my wife and I lost our newborn twins to stillbirths the day before their delivery date. I was angry at God. I became a bitter man and wanted to end my life. I felt it was all unfair and God was judging me unjustly. I was lost in a pit of self-righteousness in the midst of my failures. As my life was falling apart, I received a call from a friend inviting me to spend time at the ministry's ranch. He was also a minister, and I needed to get out to the ranch before things in my life. He was also a minister and said I needed to get out to the ranch before things in my life continued to spiral. I could see the possibility of that and agreed to spend a week out there. It is worth mentioning that I had been offered fellowship with the Fisherman Ministry several times over the past 10 years, but chose to remain in the holiness doctrine instead. The biggest obstacle was my belief in fleshly works. Belief in fleshly works is a key of retaining the salvation that came through Christ's sacrifice. Each fellowship rejection on my part was followed by an affliction in my life. As much as I wanted to separate the obvious connection between the rejection and affliction, I could not deny their amazing relationship. My experience at Grace Ranch was like a roller coaster. I saw professed Christians doing things that I believe no one who loved the Lord could ever do. People were swearing and smoking with no sense of visible remorse. I felt like I was in a den of sinners and they were going to ruin what I had established in the Lord. Smoking was so disgusting to me, and cursing was such a lack of moral restraint that I felt that I felt it dishonored God. Now let's realize this guy, if you say crap, that's cursing to him. So there's a scale there, right? But to him, this was really, really offensive. After day one, I struggled with coming back to my cabin smelling like an ashtray. I tried to deal with it the best I could and just make it through the week. As days passed and I spent time being ministered to by Richard and others, Richard's my father, I would hear of the great deliverances that came to the people through the fisherman ministry. I even became an eyewitness to this power of God. I was extremely allergic to animals and could not spend more than 15 minutes in a house that had pets. Unfortunately for me, everyone at the ranch had pets. Even the blankets in my cabin were covered in animal hair. When I first got to the ranch, Richard Utzel asked me if I wanted to be delivered from these allergies. He said they were a product of the pride in my life. I almost scoffed at him, but had a small voice inside me truly desiring this deliverance. I opened myself up through belief and received an amazing healing. The ranch had 11 or 12 dogs and several cats. Even though there was animal hair everywhere, I did not react. My lungs did not close up, but they had always done before. On day 2, I found myself at Ann's camper with Richard sitting next to 2 dogs and a cat. I could not believe it, but I believed it. The dogs were sitting on my right and my left, just staring at me, the cat sitting by my head on the couch about 3 inches away. By day 3, I was being loved and licked by the dogs. The reason I mention this is that if a dog licked me, I would normally break out in hives. I was very allergic to animal saliva as well. Over the many years, my poor kids would have to be decontaminated before coming home every time they were near pets. They could not go near me until they had washed their hands, changed their clothes. Now I was being loved by these animals with no reaction. If that wasn't amazing enough, I also had bad dairy allergies. My first night at the ranch, I was faced with a cheesy spaghetti bake. I always stayed away from dairy. If I accidentally ate food with dairy, my body would react pretty violently with explosive diarrhea. Richard walked over and slapped me lightly on the chest and rebuked that spirit. I told him it was common for people of color, Lewis is a black guy, to be lactose intolerant. He said it was from my desire to be special. Dad also told him, and I believe it to be true, that even though he was a Christian, he even rejected even the simplest, sincere milk of the Word. And that spiritual decision to reject God's Word was manifesting physically. Anyway, it goes on. I surely was not going to be some hero and risk a first night of explosive diarrhea at the ranch just to impress this guy. I only had a small outhouse with a limited capacity porta potty, and frankly I was scared of how it would turn out. But somehow I was overtaken with the thoughts of my deliverance from the animal allergies and believed that a deliverance from my dairy allergies were going to follow. That night I had 2 servings of cheesy spaghetti bake. As I sat next to a little dog and cat, I was dropped off at my little cabin with no signs of cramping or fears of explosive diarrhea. I went through the night and awoke snugly, tightly, with 2 animal hair covered blankets. I pondered the moment in some level of disbelief. Could this guy who was smoking out of one side of his mouth and praying for me out of the other side be of God? Is it possible that I was delivered from the allergies that were plaguing my life for over 10 years? I tried remaining in my own self-righteous judgment of them, but as God began dealing with me, I realized that my selfishness hurt more people than their smoking or cursing ever had. My eyes began opening up. If I believed that I could be used of God with far more grievous offenses than these people could easily be used of God, it was a tough pill to swallow because I still held myself in some level of pride, thinking that I was a better servant to Christ than they.